It's a good-looking black cherry, isn't it, Claude?
Yeah, from this side anyway.
Yeah. The one of the things about fire, and Nate, why don't you tell him, is where's the proof of the pudding?
Well, we'd have to come around the back side here to see that.
The uphill side.
The uphill side. As you can see, there's some decay and damage to the tree. And as the fire came uphill, driven by the slope and by the wind, and when the wind blew the fire around this tree, it had an eddying effect. So the fire came around the sides and into an eddy and created damage on the uphill side of the tree.
There was more heat right there than any part of the tree.
That's right. And
on
so
the uphill side.
it killed the cambium in this part of the tree and didn't kill it on the front side.
That's like the tip of the flame, or just away from it.
Yeah.
It's a hot,
As the wind
spot.
As the wind comes around the tree, it actually curls and eddies like it does behind your car. And so that eddying effect puts the flame right against the tree and kills it in that one spot. But as you can see too, the tree's trying to defend itself and wall off that damage that occurred to it. And so it's starting to grow, and this growth right here is trying to close this wound.
Yeah. At 20 years ago, the edge of that wound may have been out to here, but if you get your saw, we can see what that did in 20 years. But that's a good point, is the tree's not going to take this. As far as merchantable timber, it's ruined.
Yep.
But the tree's going to live. It's not going to die. Eventually, all this rot will turn to air, and it'll be a hollow tree.
Well, we'll take a look at it.
And you can see right from the wound right here, this is when the fire occurred. Right about there.
Yeah.
And it damaged the tree, or burnt part of the tree, into the old rings. In other words, the tree, there's the center of the tree, and it had grown out from there out to here. Maybe Jim wants to estimate how many rings or years that is, but then at this point right here, here's the front. This was the front part of the tree, and that's when the fire occurred. You can see a little bit of black in the annual ring that's left from the scar. But then the tree started to try and grow over or wall off that damage that happened. And that's why we see this growth, this coming out around here. As the tree grew from here out around, it tried to wrap around that wound and protect itself.
That's about the 20 years into there.
Into there?
It looks like it
Yep.
was pretty well stunted for 4 or 5 years, not much happened, and then on the healthy side of the tree, it took off and grew pretty good. There's about a half inch right there in that growth ring. That's been an inch a year if it were
Yeah.
the same all the way around.
Yeah, I hope you can see, maybe we could take that in the studio if it doesn't show, but how this tree had a different life after the fire too. I mean, it lived, its neighbors died, so he was the only guy in the neighborhood, and we talked about competition before, and all of a sudden look at the way this, if it took 50 years to make that much wood, in 20 it made that much wood.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just two different lives. Yeah. It's so was the fire bad to this guy or good to this guy? Best thing that ever happened to him.
As far as him growing as a tree, but as far as a good high quality timber tree, it ruined the tree.
Yeah. Well, I think then we can say the
biomass,
firewood or fire changes. It isn't good or bad. It depends.
Right.
But it sure changes
But
things.
if this didn't have a defect like that, this would be perhaps a $2,000 a 1,000 board foot tree.
That's right.
Cherry veneer.
How big would it be? It'd be this much bigger over here.
Yeah.
I mean, this part can't grow. This part
That
died.
was the center.
Maybe it would be that big, because something released it at this point.
Well,
if it had continued to grow at this rate, 20 years, if you added 20 more rings onto what's there, the tree may have only been this big.
No, but I mean,
20 years
say
from now.
the fire killed all its neighbors and didn't harm this tree.
That's right.
We would have had a tree.
A huge tree.
A huge tree, yeah.
Yeah.
This damage got transmitted and magnified all the way up the tree.
Yeah.
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 And you can see right here, right after the fire occurred, it slowed the growth of the tree down tremendously. It was spending more energy trying to recoup itself and start to grow again. And so for 4 or 5 years, it didn't do much at all. Then all of a sudden, it hit a point and just started jumping. And that's when it really developed its crown back and started to grow good.
No, that could have been quite a tree, and that's our most valuable species today. For this particular day is a good black cherry.
Yep.
And we talked about the fire wrapping around the tree. When it was standing, it looked like this was the only part that was damaged. And you say, well, how does the fire just kill that little portion of the tree? Well, it actually didn't. It actually killed
Great percentage of it.
yeah, 70% of the circumference of the tree and only left the very front part.
So actually the fire, at the time the fire took place, this is what we had for a tree, something like this. Well, we're here, and this was the tree prior to that, and all this has grown since the fire, which is a lot of biomass of wood, but unfortunately it's still it's not a good usable log for anything because of the damage that's in it. It goes for 16, 18 feet up the tree. Virtually the whole tree is ruined.
Yeah.
And again, that tree had the potential to be this big.
Right.
That much more wood on that side would have been
The same dimension
right.
over there, 10 inches. If we had 10 inches here, we'd have a 20-inch diameter tree.
Right, yeah. Just growing on 2.5 sides now.
Yep. And the stump of this tree.
Yeah.
So this was one of the trees that unfortunately didn't make it.
Might have stayed alive though for 5 or 6 years before it
That's right.
gave up.
Yep. And I can, like Jim said, a lot of the funguses in nature will imitate that black look on the trees. But on this tree, the base of the tree actually has charcoal in it, and you can see that's black in your hands.
There is more deterioration here on what was the uphill side of the tree.
Yep. And this tree may have been a competitor of the cherry tree.
Yeah. That's probably a white birch. I think there's enough bark there to say that was probably. I mean, that's what this forest was most places a white birch forest.
But this fire is just one of nature's tools to naturally, selectively thin herself. And in this case, it may have over-thinned it a little bit by damaging or killing a lot of trees, but certain tree species, such as oak, really thrive when a light fire goes through and kills off the understory. It actually helps them grow bigger faster.
And obviously here, 150, 200 years ago, this was open pasture land or something, because we have a stone wall there, we're right here in the
Right in the corner of a field, pasture.
Yeah. And Jim said it earlier, fire mimics that abandonment of farmland. It all of a sudden is a large open expanse of non-forest that fills back in eventually.
The pioneer species, you call them, that like the sunlight, like the exposure, the white birch.
They don't have to like it, Claude, they need it.
They need it.
It's a necessity.
White birch there, there's popple over there. Pin cherry.
That was a black cherry we cut, and that was here at the fire.
Pin cherry weed tree.
This is a relative of the black cherry, and this is called the pin cherry or fire cherry in a lot of places. And in this case, I guess you don't want to call it a fire cherry because it's here because of the removal of the other trees. And when the first time, it was the first spring, because I can remember coming back in late summer after that fire to see what was occurring here, and you were walking up to your knees in pin cherry. I mean, they were just, 2 months later, we were walking through a grassland of pin cherry. And that seed was there, and it remained dormant in the soil, just stood until that seed reaches a certain temperature, and it's caused by the sunlight. When that certain temperature hits that seed, it says grow, and that germinates, and until you reach that temperature, that seed will not germinate. And it just be a waste of time because that tree can't grow in the shade. So it waits. That's its built-in survival thing for that pin cherry. And right now, probably for the last 10 years, that thing has been producing seed, dropping it on the ground. And if there's ever another major disturbance like that, then its offspring can take off and grow. So The fire was to change what was growing here, but it didn't hurt that pin cherry. It said, go seed go, and it went.
And then this by growing and becoming somewhat dominant, it's larger than some here, are helping the hard maple to strive to reach the sunlight to become better shaped, self-pruned tree.
Yeah, yeah.
Better timber tree.
And then not hang around too long to stun it.
Right.
It's a great tree, great
so it's
tree.
like overstory removal, but it's automatic. Does it itself.
Yeah.
Nature does it.
Yeah. And if we came back here 10 years, probably the pin cherry would be pretty much in decline. Okay?
It's just more of a weed tree.
Well, why don't we say it has a purpose?
Firewood tree. Yeah, it has a purpose, but it's not a commercial tree.
No, no.
And it was funny you mentioned that those seeds needed heat to grow, and some trees actually need heat from the fire to make their seeds grow. Some species like pitch pine have what they call serotinous cones. They're pine cones, and they're sealed with a resin that needs the heat from the fire to open that resin to release the seeds, and that's the only way the tree can regenerate is with fire. And we don't have a lot of those fire-dependent species here in Vermont, but there are a few.
Probably if we had more fire, we'd have more of those.
That's very true.
Right? I mean, it wouldn't stand much of a chance here.
Yeah. And this fire started about Easter Sunday, or very close to it?
I guess it was Monday, the Monday after Easter, 1976.
And I understand it was from some leaves that had been raked on a lawn at a camp from some people from out of state, and they decided to burn the leaves and get rid of them, and I guess they got rid of the leaves and a couple hundred acres of the mountain also.
Yeah.
Some more leaves.
Yeah, and that's debris burning or leaf burning and things like that are probably 90% of the cause of wildfires in Vermont. We average about 200 to 400 forest fires a year, and 90% of those are started from debris burning. The other 10% vary between arson, children playing with matches, campfires, lightning, things like that.
And a route a fire will take, I guess, is from the bottom of a slope going up.
Yeah.
And probably if we have a prevailing wind from the west, they're more apt to go from a west and east if there's a...
Yeah. Wind is the primary factor that determines where your fire is going to go, but slope definitely also has a big effect on a fire.
Look, Jim, Nate, here's some sumac. Sumac lemonade's just the thing to take the edges off a hard afternoon. Pick over a generous handful of these red berries and drop them into a pan, mash them slightly, cover with boiling water, and allow to steep until the heat is gone and it's well colored. Then strain through 2 thicknesses of cloth, sweeten to taste, and serve either hot or cold. This is an old Indian drink. Incidentally, those daylily petals go good in a salad. They're sweet. The rapidly growing staghorn sumac, also called the lemonade tree and the vinegar tree, is one of the largest species of the cashew family, commonly reaching 10 to 20 feet in height. It's easily recognized at any season because of the close resemblance of its stout and velvety twigs to deer antlers while these are still in the velvet. Some Indian tribes liked this acid drink so much that they dried the small, one-seeded berries and stored them for winter use. Many settlers followed suit. Well, Nate, I certainly appreciate you coming by today and giving us all this information. The more I learn about this, as many other things, the more I find out there is to learn about it. I'm sure we're going to have more questions for you in the future.
No problem. It's been a fun day. Looking at the fire, the effects of a 20-year-old fire, and talking with Smokey, and it was fun.
The fire warden, the old fire tower man.
Yeah, the fire lookout.
Yeah.
One of the things I remember reading one time, one of the biggest forest fires in Vermont, Groton, is that how you pronounce it?
Groton.
Yeah.
And I think it ended up with about 100 people get down in the river, and the fire went across on top of their heads. So that was in the 1880s or something, and then started the state started some of its system after that.
Yeah. For some of the local people here, they probably weren't around then, but in 1908 they burned about 1,400 acres in the Glastonbury area.
1908?
1908, yeah. So we have had our share of large fires.
And I believe it said in 1857 or something, the range east of Manchester in Sunderland, which is now the Live Brook Wilderness, that was burned, and I think the maps call it the burning, some of it.
Yep.
Contour maps.
That was 1857, and then the Rich Lumber Company cut in 1915, 1917.
Aren't we going up there this
Yes,
fall?
we're definitely going up there.
Yeah.
When the leaves get off so we can see where we're going, so we don't get lost.
Why don't we bring Nate with us?
Yeah, he can
Well-
drive the train. No, the train doesn't go there anymore.
We'll look for some more fire scars.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank
Seeing
you, pal.
Okay, we'll see you, Nate.
Alrighty.
Thanks
Yeah.
again.
Take care.
Yeah.
I hear someone cutting wood over here. Let's
Okay.
see what's going on.
Boy, that's better than a Jane Fonda workout. Look what I've accomplished. Oh, hey, Bob.
Jim, did you see that Bob? Yeah. Boy, he was really going. Oh, someone's doing some firewood here. There's differences in wood, though. I know I try to keep some of the better ones in my wood pile. I don't always succeed. Looks like a variety here.
You know, I guess we've got 3 different categories of wood if we want to group them into high, medium, and low BTU values. We've got a hardhack, high BTUs, yellow birch, high BTUs, and a straight tree, the sugar maple, high BTUs. Those are the good heaters, the ones you want to burn in the dead of winter.
You have a chart that
Yep.
that shows what some of these are?
Yeah, and we can compare them to fuel oil, which a lot of people use. The high value woods are beech, yellow birch, sugar maple, ash, and a quart of that wood is comparable to 214 gallons of fuel oil. And then some of the medium value woods, pretty common, white birch and soft maple. And a quart of that wood is comparable to about 180 gallons of fuel oil. And that's kind of wood you want to burn in the winter too. That's still good heat. And spring and fall wood, some of our pin cherries, striped maple. Not a good idea to burn this, but 2 reasons: because it creosotes chimney. This is a spruce. It creosotes chimney and there's not much heat in it. And that's 125 gallons of the low BTU woods. And those would be good for spring and fall when you just want a fire to warm up the house, and by 10 o'clock it's warm enough outside. So there's a place for all the woods, but I wouldn't burn this in the middle of January and go to bed because the fire would be out and it'd be very cold in the middle of the night.
Wonder whose wood this is. Oh, hey, this is probably the owner.
Uh-huh.
It's Mother Merrick.
Hi.
Oh, getting your wood ready for the winter?
Oh, yes.
What are you dragging that chain for?
Oh, Claude, have you ever tried to push one?
No, I guess not. Springtime after the winter of the blue snow, Babe, the blue ox calf, had grown so that he measured 42 feet and a plug of tobacco between the horns. Paul Bunyan, determined to make use of this huge, well-natured animal, invented logging. Originally, Paul Bunyan planned to uproot trees by hand and transport them by Babe. At this time, he had not yet dreamed of the superb tools and marvelous logging methods that he was to originate, or of the countless crews of little loggers he was to import from France, Ireland, Scotland, and Scandinavia, or of the tremendous river drives and the mammoth camp life he was to create. Paul Bunyan, a true man of the woods, was troubled by the paperwork necessary in business, and was lucky to find the greatest man with figures that ever lived, Johnny Inkslinger. Paul's logging operations rapidly grew more extensive. He cleared off 700 townships in the Smiling River country for a big farm run by John Shears, his base farmer. It got so that figuring occupied all of Paul Bunyan's time between supper and breakfast, so he invented the multiplication tables, cube roots, and algebra. Paul also invented bossmen to carry on the work in the woods. Paul's first foreman was Gunderson, nicknamed Shot because of his explosive nature. Gunn originated the highball system and was responsible for much of the logger's tough vocabulary. His famous words of encouragement were, "Put a better notch in that stick or I'll cave your head in. Heave harder on that peavy handle, you gizzardless scissorbill, or I'll put the caulks to you." Shot Gunderson's downfall came in the second winter on Tadpole River in the Bullfrog Lake country. That was the winter of the big wind that blew so hard for 4 months that Shot Gunderson had to constantly yell as loud as possible. His voice cracked under the strain, and he was succeeded by Cross Halson. Cross Halson had such a passion for river driving that he could never stop the drive at its destination. He would run the logs on for miles and then drive them back again. The upstream driving was terrible on labor. Each logger had to drive one log at a time. Treading it, he would roll it against the current. So much time and energy was wasted that Paul Bunyan fired him. The next foreman was Ole Olson, followed by Lars Larson, Swan Swanson, Pete Peterson, John Johnson, Jens Jensen, Anders Anderson, Hans Hansen, and Eric Erickson. Paul now had a great need for better foremen. He was about to log off the Dakota country in the region of the mountain that stood on its head. Luckily, Hels Helsen, the big Swede, the incomparable bull of the woods, arrived. So the job in the virgin Dakota country was started. In the center of a forested plain stood the largest and most original of all mountains, the mountain that stood on its head. Its peak was buried in the ground, and its slopes ran outward instead of in toward its summit. It was 5 miles from the head of the mountain up the slope to the rim of its foot. Climbing seemed impossible, as one would have to move with his feet uppermost or else walk with his head. The trees had their roots in the ground and their tops pointed downward. The summit of the mountain, perhaps I should go on saying foot, but this might prove confusing, was a plain 2 miles above a plain. It was flat and heavily timbered. This unnatural mountaintop was in the form of a true circle, which was 127 miles in circumference. One area of the rim of the circle rose gently and sloped to the center of the plain. Here were the high springs that formed the lofty river which flowed and fell 2 miles to the plain below. Paul Bunyan named this waterfall Niagara in memory of his old moose hound. The name was later passed on to a little waterfall along the U.S.-Canadian border.
Oh, hi, Jim. Hi, Claude. Fancy meeting you up here. We don't get too many visitors up here except for at hunting season. Well, why don't you come on up and I'll introduce you to Uncle Bill and show you some of my gardens.
Hi, Uncle Bill.
Would you just hold him for a second? I gotta pick up this wood. Come on, Bill.
There. That's a good day's work right there, Claude. Come on over and I'll introduce you to the rest of the family. This is Nan and Nanny and Bill, William, Willie, and Lily.
How many do you have?
Oh my goodness, 20 anyway.
Now take your shoes off to count them all.
Yes, I would.
Quite a collection.
Yes, they're good to have around. They're a lot of fun.
It's like you have a nice garden over here too.
Yes, come on over and I'll show that to you too.
How do you get out of here?
Come on, Nan. Come on, sweetheart.
Looks like your garden's doing real well this year.
Doing really well. Really, really well. I'm very pleased with it.
Is it hard to grow things this far up on the mountain?
No, not really. No, not really at all. I've got pretty much everything in here, a little bit of everything. The vegetables and herbs and even some flowers.
The peas have gone by with, I guess.
Yes, come and gone. Come and gone.
Oh, I'd love to see a good garden.
Tomatoes are coming very nicely. Still green, but they're coming.
Does Uncle Bill help you with the weeding? I don't see
Not
many.
in here. No, not in here.
Potatoes, cucumbers, everything.
Everything.
You probably don't get to the Grand Union very often.
Not often at all, no.
You've got some other livestock you want to show us?
Yes, yes. Come on with me and we'll go take a look at it.
Was this part of that plane that crashed up here on the mountain a few years ago?
I don't know. Well, years ago they used to make one hell of a venison stew in those old kettles.
Oh, quite impressive. That's a big one.
Isn't that gorgeous?
Let's go see the rest of your animals.
Yes. Right up there. Well, Claude, there's my turkey. Try to raise at least one every year. Well, come about November, they always disappear.
A big fellow.
He is a big fellow. Yep. And that's Tom.
What you got here in the cage?
It's rabbits. This is Bunny. Hi, Bunny.
Kind of relaxing.
Mm-hmm. That's Bun, and that's Bun Bun. Just taking in the warm day. Lots of chickens. Always good for eggs. And right over here we got pigs. Come on over and I'll show you. And here are my pigs. They're having a little corn. This is ham, sausage, bacon, and pork chop.
Good looking pig.
Yes, very nice pigs. We've been threading a hole there in the middle, getting in there and getting cooled down. Is your name Buttermilk? You're going to bite me, aren't you? Here.
It's a fine looking animal.
Yes.
Good marking.
Yeah.
What's your horse's name?
Buttermilk. I've got a couple more over here if you'd like to go see.
Hey? A couple of cattle out there.
Yes, that's Elsie out there. She's getting ready to calve here any day. She's due today.
Well, we better find Jim. He's gone off again.
Off again.
We're going to...
Well-
That mountain's named after you, or were you named after the mountain?
I'm not exactly sure, but
Came
can
first.
I tag along?
Sure, if you can, if we find Jim, see where he is.
Let's go find Jim.
Okay.
Come on. I gotta wait a little bit between the clapping. Those are red-headed pine sawflies, and they've already devoured all the needles off that twig right there. Off all the needles on that twig right there. Maybe we can follow this next week too. Now they all work in groups. You never find them alone. They all have to be together. And here's a branch that next week, or in a day or two, will be all gone. This is gone. They're starting on this one. I think that'll be fun to watch that in a week. And there's a lot, you talked about insects already, about them living in the forest, and some are a problem and some aren't. But we'll watch this tree being defoliated. One more dance? Oh, they're tired. They're noticeable when you walk through the woods that they'll do that little flicking and they'll catch your eye, that movement. You see these brown needles right here?
That will kill that branch
Yep. No, this will be alive out here.
on the end.
Yep, yeah. That won't refoliate though. That won't ever have needles on it again. And this tree never, yes it did. See how this is gone right here? There's no needles here. That was defoliated last year, and that was defoliated last year. But they didn't do much damage to the tree as a whole. I think they're going to do a lot more this year than last year. There's some birds talking right now. You can hear the birds calling now, Claude. Someday there'll be a bird here, and these are pretty easy picking because they're in such a group that there'll be somebody's dinner someday. But we'll follow this along to see how the tree grows and how they eat at the same time. We'll see. I'm sure the tree's not going to be hurt very much by it.
So the tree is food source for the insect, which is food source for the bird.
Yep, yep. It's that big circle of how that's how the eggs were laying in there last year. Oh, I didn't say that? Okay. This brown needles right here that look like they're all twisted and dried out, the adult of this little caterpillar is they call it a fly, a sawfly. And it's it's probably about a 3/4 of an inch long, and it has a sword or a slitter on its behind, and it cuts little slots in these needles, and it laid the eggs, and they overwintered. These caterpillars overwintered as an egg inside that needle, and when they crawl out in the spring, the easiest way to find sawflies early in the year is you look for these little brown twisted dried out needles that are on the end. They're always on the end of the twig. These guys, when they first start, are kind of invisible. Very, very small too. The more they eat, the bigger they get, and the bigger they get, the more they eat. So it's kind of compounds the problem.
At what time of the season will they stop their feeding?
I think most of them get. Oh, there's good. I just made a little movement in there. Probably about another 2 weeks, and then we won't find them.
And then what form will they take after that?
Then they'll become they'll go into that pupa stage, that resting stage, where they change from that to a flying insect. It doesn't look anything like this, just like a butterfly and a caterpillar don't look anything like, but this isn't a butterfly.
And they'll stay in the same area, and the eggs from these same ones will stay in the
and they'll find other Scotch pines here, or they don't hit the white pines, the soft pines, just what we call the hard pines. Kind of an interesting thing unless you're trying to grow trees as an ornamental. These guys down here are acting on them. They like to have a little rest between their hopping. Kind of a giveaway, isn't it?
Well, Claude, Jim, thank you for stopping by. I hope you had fun today. And anytime you're up in this neck of the woods, feel free to stop in. Bye.
Well, Jim, we've learned some things about fire today and
Well, I did too.
firewood.
Yeah.
And our next time you're going to be telling us why leaves change colors, how they change colors.
Yeah, it seems like summer just started. We just did that thing on growth, and we're talking about fall already. It hasn't
Well,
been much of a much of a summer.
That doesn't take long here.
Yeah.
It changes. The
Yeah.
older we get, the quicker it changes.
Yep, yep.
Well, thank you again, and
Okay.
we'll see you next month.
Next month, yep.
What do we have here? In the middle of the forest. Railroad. Railroads were used a lot to transport the forest products, the logs. There were logging railroads. In the Liebrook Wilderness area, where man has never been, some people think, the most common access is up the old railroad grade. That'll be covered in detail some future date. Some railroad spikes. Here's some a ruggler chain. New word for your vocabulary, perhaps. Called different things in different parts of the country. These were wrapped around the sled runners on a sled in the winter to keep it from pushing the horses downhill. These links are borne flat in the places that were on the bottom of the runner. Some of the mechanical loading devices, when they first came about, used tongs to hook into the logs, swing them on top of a train or sled or whatever method they were being transported with. Not used at all anymore. This set of grapple hooks probably have some other names. Sometimes logs were brought out using these, placing them toward the end of the log, driving them in, pulling the log down, then knocking it out. The axe, this is a head axe. More common felling would have been the double-bitted axe. A little later on came some saws. Crosscut saw, used for many, many years. Quite a few different types of teeth designs. In some contests today, a crosscut saw may, on occasion, beat a chainsaw with the right filers and the right people operating it. There's a buck saw, more for cutting firewood or pulp. One-man saw as opposed to the two-man. Horses were very common in the woods up into the mid part of this century. Different styles of bits. And a working horseshoe, corked up for wintertime use. Dig into the ice. Behind a horse, single horse for skidding logs would be a whiffle tree. Various devices for hooking onto the log. Here's a grapple again. Probably hand-forged chain, various size links. Worn flat in places, probably used as a ruggler chain at times also. The railroads have been used for 150 years. Occasionally we can find dates on some of the wooden railroad ties as to when the tie was installed. Here's one right here. That tie was put in place in 1928. See, it's deteriorated some. Whereas this tie is a lot newer. I think the dating stopped somewhere around 55. We'll continue with our discussion of railroads in the Liebrook Wilderness area. The Rich Lumber Company, their logging operations, 1917, where what is now our wilderness was virtually a clear cut at that time to show the resilience of Vermont forests, our golden resource.
Bill, I'd like you to meet Uncle Bill.
Uncle Bill.
It is pretty hard to tell the difference there, isn't it? I mean, look at that. And look at that.
I suppose you get the front end and the back end mixed up.
Hi, Mother Merritt. Hi, Bruin.
How are you today?
Good. What are you doing driving the truck?
I'm sorry, I forgot.
Okay.
Can we try it again?
Sure.
Why am I driving this truck again?
Look it up there. Look at that.
Oh, hi, you're Jim White.
Hi, Mother Merritt. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
What are you doing driving the truck?
Well, I'm trying to earn some extra money to go to my yearly shopping spree. I'm sorry. Oh, hi, Jim.
All right. The logs there, where are they going? Well, logs, where are you taking those?
I'm going to take those up to Rutland.
Uh-huh.
Finch Prine's on strike this week. I'm sorry, it's hot in here. I don't know how you do it.
Okay. That's a good-looking load of logs you got. Where are they going?
They're going up to Rutland. Finch Prine's on strike. I am so sorry. I am really sorry. For me there, Jim. And, I'll just read them off your forehead.
I could say, is this log going, these are going to Rutland? And you could say, yeah. And